pressure distribution. Similar to your temperature, pressure distribution can be studied under two important approaches. One is the horizontal distribution of pressure, and the other one is your vertical distribution of pressure. Temperature la vertical distribution da konja confusing ah irundhathu, normal, lab state, inversion alla. Inga it is very simple. With increasing altitude, what happens to my pressure? Pressure also decreases. So it is quite simple that with the excuse me, increasing altitude, pressure decreases. Reason in a reason decrease in the air column. Decrease in the air column. Second factor, thinning out of atmosphere. Thinning out of atmosphere. Atmosphere becomes less denser when we go higher and higher. Horizontal distribution is what we study quite detailedly, and this is nothing but the latitudinal distribution of pressure. Illaya? Distribution of pressure. Eppadi heat zones paathumo temperature portha varaikum latitudinal la, this is known by the name pressure belts of the world. Pressure belts of the world. Okay, so smaller heading, pressure belts. Pressure belts. Listen ma, then you can draw. For example, if this is my earth, and if I divide the earth into different heat belts. Why? Because now I have completed the relationship between temperature and pressure. So when I know my heat belts, it is easy for me to draw my pressure belts. This is how it functions. So normal when we move from equator to polewards, temperature decreases. So I'm gonna give that in a literal sense here. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to treat this as a very hot layer. This is hot. This is cold. And this is very cold. Ibdida enna irukunu, heat zones irukku. So very hot, cold and very cold. Ibdi irunda, enoda pressure belts eppdi irukunu? Pressure belts very hot ah irunda, very low. Because temperature and pressure are inversely proportional. Idu higher irunda, idu enakku low ah irukonu. So very hot na very high temperature. So idu enakku very low pressure. Idu high temperature na idu enakku low pressure. So idu cold na low temperature, therefore high pressure. Idu very cold na very low temperature, meaning very high pressure. So this could have been the distribution of pressure belts, primarily depending upon only your thermal factors, illana temperature factors. Eppdi irukano? Too high and too low. Means two belts of high pressure and two belts of low pressure. In the madriyana belt distribution irukano. Ana real cases la apdi illa. When we look into the real pressure distribution, again 4 important pressures of northern hemispheres. Okay, this is a low pressure, this is a high pressure belt, this is a low pressure belt, and this is a high pressure belt. Meaning there is an alternative arrangement of high and low pressures. Ila match agradhu yaru? See, low pressure, low pressure. Amandana match agudhu. Inga na enna edirpaathukanum? Temperature base panni mattum irundirunda idu high temperature, low pressure, ana actual pressure distribution this region experience high, right? So except your equatorial low and your polar high, the other two has a mismatch. So in the low pressure, ingeyum low pressure, inga high pressure, ingeyum high pressure. அப்ப இந்த ரெண்டு பேர் மட்டும் தான் மேட்ச் ஆகுறாங்க, இவங்க ரெண்டு பேர் மேட்ச் ஆகல அப்படினா apart from temperature வேற ஏதோ ஃபேக்டர் இருக்கணும் இல்லையா? Why the pressure is distributed in a specific manner, அதுதான் ஸ்டடி பண்ண போறோம். இது புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியுதா? pressure belts எப்படி அரேஞ்ச் ஆயிருக்கு? pressure belts அப்படிங்கிறது டெம்பரேச்சர் மாதிரியான simple arrangement கிடையாது. It is an alternative arrangement of high and low pressures, right? So pressure belt, first we'll draw the exact nature, then we'll discuss how each pressure belt is formed, right? So when I discuss the entire earth, in and around your equatorial region, that is 10 degree north to 10 degree south, this pressure belt is known as equatorial low pressure belt. Equatorial low pressure belt, and at a latitude of 25 to 35, 20 to 35 கூட எடுத்துக்கலாம், 23 and a half, அதாவது in and around 23 and a half latitudes. இது என்ன? Tropic of Cancer சுத்தி இல்லையா? This is known as subtropical high pressure belt. Subtropical high pressure belt, and at a latitudes 45 to 65, that is just nearer to your 66 and a half degree latitudes. This is known as subpolar low pressure belt. Subpolar low pressure belt, and around your polar region, this is known as polar high pressure belt. Okay, so note down, these are the 4 important pressure belts. இதே மாதிரி same pressure belt is being superimposed in your southern hemisphere too. This is your subtropical high pressure belt, subpolar low pressure belt, and polar high pressure belt. So how many pressure belts are there in total? 7. Equator is the common ஆச்சே. Equatorial low pressure belt இங்கிறது common, 0 degree, in and around 0 degree. So மேல 3, கீழ 3, central 1. So there are total 7 pressure belts in both your hemispheres, both your northern and southern hemisphere. Collectively we have 7 pressure belts. So pressure create ஆகிறதுக்கான ரெண்டு important concept என்ன? ஒன்னு thinning of air column, or decline in your air column, or ascendance of descendance of air. எங்கெல்லாம் ascendance இருக்கோ அது low pressure, எங்கெல்லாம் descendance இருக்கோ அது எனக்கு high pressure. இது புரிஞ்சுக்க முடியுதா? இனி pressure belts form ஆகணும்னா I need to know 2 important factors. One is your atmospheric circulation, of air, and surface circulation. Atmospheric movement இல்லனா surface movement னு பார்க்கலாம். And surface movement தான் what we call as the wind. Or what is wind? Wind is nothing but the movement of air, or air in movement is known as wind. And wind happens to be follow 2 important principles. Okay, movement of wind, it always happens from a high pressure region to a low pressure region. windங்கிறது எப்படி மூவ் ஆகும்? windங்கிறது it will always move from high pressure region to a low pressure region. Second aspect, that a wind is always named from the direction it originates. From the direction it originates. For example, land breeze, sea breeze nalla paathom illaya, wind movement. அப்ப land breeze ங்கிறது என்னவா இருக்கும்? land breeze ங்கிறது என்ன? land breeze அப்படிங்கிறது wind moving from land to sea. Right? A wind is always named from the direction it originates. அப்ப land breeze ங்கிறது land ல இருந்து sea க்கு மூவ் ஆகுற wind தான் land breeze. அப்ப sea breeze ங்கிறது என்னவா இருக்கும்? From sea to land. நம்மள பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் நமக்கு தெரிஞ்ச ரொம்ப காமனான ஒரு wind is your southwest monsoon. இல்லையா? monsoon season கேள்விப்பட்டிருப்பீங்க. We will discuss later, but southwest monsoon அப்படின்னா அந்த windோட direction என்ன? southwesterly மூவ்மெண்ட்ல இருக்கக்கூடிய wind தான் southwest monsoon. So எந்த டைரக்ஷன்ல இருந்து வருதோ அந்த டைரக்ஷன் வச்சு தான் அந்த wind பேர் வைப்பாங்க. Okay, so இந்த ரெண்டு கான்செப்ட் தெரியணும். Surface wind ஓட movement ஓட direction is influenced by pressure differences. Whenever there is pressure differences created, the air will move, and from your high pressure regions to low pressure regions. ரெண்டாவது atmospheric circulation இல்லையா? ஒன்னு surface circulation, that is what we know as the wind system. Second, atmosphereல இதான் நம்ம முன்னாடி பார்த்தது, whenever there is ascendance of air. Sorry. So two cases can happen. One is your low pressure. Low pressure எப்படி characterize பண்ணுவோம்? Ascendance of air இல்லையா? So ascending air, whenever there is an air column ascends, to fill in the gap, the air from the nearby region would rush in. So low pressure region is characterized by two factors. One is ascending air. Second என்ன? Second converging air. Convergence of air. Okay, so atmospheric circulation la rendu da, one ascending air column, descending air column. Ascending air column nadakkanum அப்படினா கண்டிப்பா wind என்ன ஆயிருக்கணும்? Relatively nearby regions ல இருந்து converge ஆயிருக்கணும். So low pressure, இது எனக்கு low pressure na, it is identified by two factors. எங்க இருந்தெல்லாம் wind தூரமா இருக்கிற ஏதாவது ஒரு இடத்துல இருந்து wind, ஏனா low pressure ஓட மீனிங் என்ன? high ல இருந்து தான் low க்கு wind மூவ் ஆகும். So low pressure na எங்க இருந்தெல்லாமும் wind converge ஆகுற இடம் low pressure. So convergence of wind, thereby ascendance of wind. இது ரெண்டுமே low pressure region ஓட characteristics. அப்ப high pressure எப்படி இருக்கும்? High pressure, descendance of air column, thereby divergence of wind. ஏன்னா high pressure region is the source of origin of wind movement. High ல இருந்து தான் low க்கு மூவ் ஆகும். அப்போ high pressure region is characterized by descending air. Descending air and divergence of surface wind. Divergence of air. Now, in the air, I'm going to replace the word wind. Yeah? ஏன்னா high to low move ஆகுற wind, high to low move ஆகுற air ஓட பேர் தான் என்ன? Wind. அப்ப convergence of wind, divergence of wind அப்படிங்கிறது யாரோட characteristics? Low pressure and high pressure region ஓட characteristics. So இந்த ரெண்டு mechanism எனக்கு தெரிஞ்சா எதை அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணிட முடியும்? என்னோட so called pressure distribution அண்டர்ஸ்டாண்ட் பண்ணிட முடியும். ஓகே, இதை எழுதிடுங்க, we will discuss. இது கிளியரா இருக்கா? கான்செப்ட்ஸ் படிச்சுக்கங்க. சப்ஜெக்ட் ரொம்ப ஈஸி தான். கிளைமேட்டாலஜி இன்ஃபேக்ட் ரொம்ப ரொம்ப ஈஸி, பிகாஸ் இட் சூப்பர் இம்போசஸ் 90% of your syllabus with the GS, right? So coming back, I'm going to draw the first important belt, the formation of your first important belt. Okay, equatorial region. We know this is the high temperature region, high temperature. Because of maximum insolation, temperature is more, so heating of air would happen. air heat ஆனா என்ன நடக்கும்? air இந்த இடத்துல heat ஆனா ascendance of air would happen. ascendance ஓட maximum limit தான் என்ன? troposphere. And we all know troposphere is elongated in your equatorial region and the troposphere has minimum range in your polar region. இது என்ன 8 kilometers அப்படின்னா இது எனக்கு 18 kilometers வரைக்குமே troposphere தான். So the upper limit of vertical mixing of air is your troposphere. So equatorial region la ascendance of air is done by what? What is the causating factor of ascending air? Temperature. So high temperature induces which pressure? Low pressure. அப்போ equatorial region la என்ன pressure form ஆகும்? Low pressure. அதுக்கு பேர் என்ன? equatorial low pressure belt. இல்லையா? இந்த ascendanceங்கிறது இந்த போர்ட்ல இருந்து வெளில வர மாதிரியான assumption. இல்லையா? போர்ட்ல இருந்து வெளில வருது. equatorial regionல இருந்து மேல ascend ஆகுற air. ascend ஆகிக்கிட்டே போயிட்டே இருக்க முடியாது. இல்லையா? At one point the air would lose its energy and it ultimately descend down on the earth surface. air column எங்க descend ஆகுதோ அப்ப என்ன pressure create ஆகும்? air column descend ஆனா என்ன pressure create ஆகும்? high pressure, right? இந்த pressure belt க்கு பேர் என்ன? subtropical high pressure belt. Descendance of air. So ascending air due to high temperature along the troposphere it will move because it will lose its energy and thereby it would descend down. இங்க இன்னொரு pressure create ஆயிருக்கும் இந்த இடத்துல. இது என்ன belt? high pressure. இந்த high pressure beltக்கான reason என்ன? low temperature. The temperature is very low in polar region, so obviously low temperature has been created. Now watch pa. இப்ப earth surfaceல atmosphere விட்டுருங்க. surfaceல high pressures and low pressures create ஆயிடுச்சா? so obviously wind movement will start. so high pressure regionல இருந்து தான் low pressureக்கு wind move ஆகும். wind is always moving. இந்த yellow line, yellow arrow marks represent surface movement, white arrow marks represent atmospheric movement, right? so surfaceல high pressure regionல இருந்து low pressureக்கு move ஆகும். high pressure ஓட diagram ஞாபகம் இருக்கா? divergence of wind. so from the high pressure the wind is diverged throughout all regions. எங்க இடத்துக்கு இங்க move ஆகும்? towards the equatorial low pressure. இங்க இந்த high pressure ல இருந்து wind will start. similarly இங்க இருந்து high pressure ல இருந்து wind will produce. now along the mid latitudes there is a convergence of high pressure wind, surface wind from polar high pressure and subtropical high pressure. ஆமா தானே? ஏன்னா இதுமே high pressure belt, wind அங்க இருந்து தான் வரணும். இங்கேயுமே high pressure, இங்க இருந்து wind வருது. ரெண்டு பேருக்கும் மீட் ஆகுற இடம் என்ன? in and around your subtropical latitudes. so when two convecting air meets they have no other option but to ascend. இல்லையா? வேற வழியே இல்ல. இவங்க ரெண்டு பேரும் இந்த ரீஜன்ல இருந்து ascend ஆவாங்க. ascend ஆயிட்டே போக முடியாது. திரும்ப ஏதாவது ஒரு ஸ்பெசிபிக் ரீஜியன்ல டிசெண்டன்ஸ் நடக்கணும். எக்ஸ்கியூஸ் மீ. சோ இந்த ரெண்டு விண்டும் இங்க கன்வர்ஜ் ஆகுறதுனால இது எந்த பிரஷரா மாறுது? லோ பிரஷர் பெல்ட்டா மாறுது. இந்த லோ பிரஷரோட பேர் என்ன? சப் போலார் லோ பிரஷர் பெல்ட். சோ கன்வர்ஜ் ஆனதுனால they also ascend up. right? now very closely watch. low pressures ல ரெண்டு phenomenon இருக்கும். low pressure belt ல ascendance of air இருக்கும், convergence of air இருக்கும். high pressure region எப்படி இருக்கும்? high pressure region ல divergence of air and descendance of air. descendance of air and divergence of air. so this is how your pressure distribution is done. தெரிஞ்சுக்க முடியுதா? yellow line வந்து surfaceல equatorial low pressure belt, subtropical high pressure belt of northern hemisphere ல இருந்தும் subtropical high pressure belt of southern hemisphere ல இருந்தும் convergence of wind happening surface layers ல, surface ல converge ஆகி upper air ல ascend ஆகுது low pressure. இந்த high pressure எப்படி form ஆகுது? descendance of air descend ஆகி diverge ஆகுது. இந்த low pressure எப்படி? இந்த high pressure and இந்த high pressure ல இருந்து surface winds வருது திரும்ப ascending up. So in the region we have two important things, equatorial low pressure belt and polar high pressure belt. They are referred as thermally induced belt, meaning this belt is formed primarily due to temperature difference, thermally induced belt. Whereas the other two na yaar subtropical high pressure belt and subpolar low pressure belt, they are referred as dynamically induced belt, meaning the ascendance of air is not primarily because of temperature but because of the dynamics of my air movement induces the formation of these belt. Okay, so inga cold air would sink down, adanala high pressure. Inga warm air would ascend up, adanala low pressure. Idu rendu mattum da thermally induced belt, baaki rendume it is your dynamically induced belt, meaning apart from temperature the air dynamics distributes the nature of my pressure system, right? Now when we look very closely along the atmospheric distribution, there are three important cells formed or closed movement of air, where one part of the limb is your surface movement. Yeah, in the yellow arrow in the surface la nadakkudiya movement. So this cell is known as, or this particular first important cell is known as your Hadley cell, tropical or Hadley cell. The second one is known as Ferrel cell. Ferrel cell. And the third one is known as polar cell. So Hadley cell, Ferrel cell and polar cell. These three are the atmospheric circulation, ascending of air and descending of air within the limits of troposphere. In the maximum ascendance marks the upper limit of my troposphere. So this three important circulation together is known as tricellular meridional circulation. Tricellular meridional circulation. Tricellular, it is quite simple. 3 cell form agudhu, adanal tricellular. What is